Hey, what's up? This is Jake. You're in Jake's shop. So this is part 3 of doing the fender on this Camaro. I'm going to do a big whole skin on the side of this Camaro where I've went ahead and done quite a bit of work in the first 2 videos. Did the part of the wheelhouse there, did a patch panel, also did a rear section of the box pan. It's all primered up right now. It's all epoxy primered and whatnot, getting ready for the next step in the process. So first things first, I'll show you what the fender looks like, and we'll go from there. Okay, so part 1 and part 2 talked a little bit about exactly what I did to get this cut out. I went ahead and used my grinder with a cutoff wheel. You know, obviously a lot of this goes without saying, but you need to be wearing a lot of safety protection when you're doing this. Eyeglasses, gloves, and earmuffs, and technically this should even have a guard. These are very dangerous. But when you are cutting with a cutting wheel, whether you're using on a grinder or a 1/4" die grinder, you know, I use a lot of this as well. The trick is not to warp the metal when you're cutting this out. You definitely want to, you know, what I like to do is I scribe it first with the grinder, very, you know, not cut all the way through the metal, then come back maybe a second time and then maybe a third to complete the cut, depending on, you know, how thick the metal is and how hot it's really looking to warp. But so I used tape and I kind of marked out the lines where I wanted to take most of the rust out that was in this fender, and I wanted to kind of get a good patch in here. Down here I'll finish cutting this out as well, because that's the entire section of the fender I'm going to use. So basically this is going to be a flange weld when I get done on these two sides. That is going to be a butt weld, and these are lap welds because this is the factory pinch weld on the inside of the fender, and it factory pinch welds down to the box on the bottom side, and I kind of went over a little bit of that in the other videos. So here's what we're working with. This is the patch panel. This is not a complete fender. I know it looks like one, but these are, you know, what I pay for that, or what do we pay for that? Is it going to show up? $65. Yeah, a whole fender is like $300, and the big differences are in a major fender. I kind of went over it in the other videos as well, but you know, they've got all the inner pieces of the seal of the trunk. They've got the flange weld that comes up through here. They've got inside of the molding here, and then there's actually a leaded seam in here you can't see. And then they even got, you know, part of this drip rail and all this section here. So I didn't need any of that. This metal's in really good shape. I really just needed the bulk of the patch panel around the wheelhouse. And there was a little bit of action down in through here, so went ahead and I'm going to use a bulk of it. I'm not really sure I'm going to cut it back here. You know, there's definitely some action in here. Some of this I could weld. It's not rusted, but someone definitely hit it. So I am going to use a good portion of this. And you know, it only goes so far back, right? This is a patch panel. It doesn't have that. It only goes back in a little ways, because if it was a full fender, I'll show you here, it would come in through here where this natural body seam is. So I've got the body seam pretty much here, so we'll be working in this area, and I'll probably be using a part of it where it turns in, but not the whole thing. You know, you can see in here, this, I'm still debating whether or not I'm going to do a rear valance or not on this. I might. We'll see. They're a pain to take out, but there's definitely some body work that needs to happen in through here. It's not horrible, you know, these dents can be pulled and welded and worked on. It's not rusty, so I don't know. I'm still going to work with that, but for now I'm just focusing on the skin. So back here will be a butt weld as well. It's, you know, it's good, a trick. So the first thing I need to do is to fit this fender on here is get the parts out I know I don't need. So basically that is going to be where this factory body line is, down here where it meets the rocker. I'm going to go ahead and do a butt weld there. I like that factory body line, and I could cut it and grind it out and spot weld it from the inside, but I actually like the idea of just welding it solid right there. So I am going to cut off just the bottom seam of this fender right here. So this lip comes in right here where that factory seam is located. So I am going to take that off so I can get this fender on where I need it, and I'm probably going to come back here just a little bit and come up this edge. That way this component of the metal's out. And then I'll probably cut it, you know, proud up the top. You know, I'm going to leave myself a good 2-3 inches up here. You know what I'm saying? Right now I just need to cut it to where I can fit it first. And I'll show you what I'm going to do after I cut it and how I'm going to fit it, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I went ahead and got that panel rough cut, real rough cut right now. And just went ahead and clamped it using my, you know, my vice grips on the inside of the inner fender house, just to kind of get a feel for what's going on here. you know, I went ahead and cut that bottom flange off, and it's still very proud down here. But I'm going to go ahead and, you know, massage it back into place a little bit. And then I'm going to draw a line from the inside of the fender to get exactly where this butt weld needs to be. But before I do that, there's still a little bit more fitment, and that's on this back edge. You know, these fenders are not perfect. These skins are not perfect. So you can see here, you know, it's not going to sit on top like this at all. This is just kind of giving me a frame of reference. But so what I'm probably going to do here is, this back lip is pretty much worthless. It's really just a patch panel. So I'm going to come up on the opposite side of this fender. There's, you know, I left steel in here. I'm probably going to give myself a nice flange around the existing fender. And that way this lip won't be in my way to finish fitting this fender properly, at least for the initial fitment, just to get my lines where I'm going to scribe it, and then, you know, figure out where I want all my welds to be, where my flanges will be and stuff like that. So again, on off, you know, this is the key to this. Just try and do it over and over and over again to get your fitment. You can see my hole's a little offset for where the bumper mount is. It's close, but when I take the rest of this flange off, I'll get that much more wiggle room to get that into place. You know, so I'll be cutting this piece of this patch panel fender off. But first I want to trim the metal where I want it, and then trim this piece. I'll still trim it proud. I'll probably trim it around this seam right here, just so I can get the rest of my movement where I want it to be, and then I'll test fit it again. So the next step I'll show, I'll probably have this thing pretty much set up on the car where I want it to go, and then I'll scribe it from the inside. And once I get it perfectly set, it'll be on and off the car multiple times until I have this thing perfectly where I want it. You know, there's a few things you know, this bumper mount is key. This line in the car is key, and you can see kind of where this line lines up in the back. So I am going to run a string line from the opposite seam to get an idea of where I need this thing to sit. And a lot of it's going to just be, you know, you're looking at lines in these cars. You can see this line on this one coming around here, you know. So I know roughly that it's about in line with this rear tail light, or slightly lower. So I need to run some marks in here to get an idea up and down where things will go. The fender will fit itself a little bit, but I'm really looking at body lines. You know, I want this thing to be straight all the way across. I don't want it to come up in the wrong area. So it's coming along pretty well, and you can actually see this is about perfect. So it is slightly offset, you know, that body line. It's just this is about perfect where it needs to be on the car currently. So when I leave myself that little bit of lip on the inside, it'll help place this fender when I go to put that in there. So anyways, we'll on to the next step. Okay, so I figure this is a good spot to show you the next step. I went ahead and taken the skin off a couple different times, and went ahead and did some additional cutting on it. Here's the skin now. So what I've done is I clamped it into place, and I went ahead and scribed it with a line on the inside, from the inside of the car through the trunk pan and through the inside, just to get an idea where that current cut is. And really that's just a reference point. I went ahead and cut some additional metal out of my way so I could get my last fitment in. Well, not really my last fitment. It's like maybe the third to last. We'll see. But I thought this would be a good time to show you how I'm going to attach this. I'm not going to butt weld it. You know, there's a lot of stuff online about the right way to do this, the wrong way to do it, whatever. I don't know. Whatever works for you, really. I mean, I like doing a flange weld on something like this. Now, you can hopefully you can see this in the camera, but when I cut this out, you know, I was careful not to warp it. Like I said earlier, I scribed it a few times back and forth, and then did my last cut with the cutoff wheel when the metal was really thin. Not to warp the metal. But no matter what happens, is the tension's out of it now. So this fender, you know, is supposed to be out here. You know, there's supposed to be a good ½ inch or so. Well, it went in obviously when I cut it. So what I am going to do now is put the structure back into it. Put a flange on it. Now, what I'm using for that is called a flange tool. Now, this one, I think I just bought on Amazon. It's just a Rockwood flange tool. But what it does is it makes a ½ inch flange for you. I went ahead and relief cut the corners. You know, I can weld those back shut. But when I go to bend this flange, I'll show you what this tool does. You know, I want those corners out of my way. So, it's just a clamp, basically. They make hand ones as well. That's a pneumatic one. And this is just a scrap piece of metal, but I'll show you what it does. So you know, picture this as that fender side, right? Just flat. Well, you just put it in the jaws. Try and get it in the video here. And you bury it and you just work it down, right? You're just trying to make that flange. Now, you do need to be mindful a little bit about, see now what that's done for me. That was real rough and nasty looking, but you can see that there's a flange in there now. So what's going to happen is when I get this skin perfectly fit and cut, you know, it's going to overlap this metal about 1/2 inch. I'll have a little bit of wiggle room in there, but that'll be, you know, that'll be my backing for Clecos, which I'll show you later on after I get my last fitment, and also it just gives it a little more structure, a little more body. The other key to doing this fender on this big panel is I need to, before I go put my clamps on it and Clecoing into place, I need to put something behind this fender lip to pull this back out. You know, nothing special. On the last side, I just wedged a 2x4 in there, trying not to, you know, pull it too hard. I'm trying to kind of make sure it's pretty dang close to the curvature of the fender as the way it was before. It's kind of an art, you know, you're just playing with it, you're looking at it, you're looking down the sides of the car and getting as close as you can. This will have a layer of Duraglass over it. It won't be thick. You know, the trick here is, you know, there's going to be mud on this fender, there's going to be some Duraglass, some filler on this fender, but there won't be much. It'll be very thin. So I want to get it to as close to the same shape as it was before. And when I run my flange tool, you know, I'm just burying it on the edge, just bring it all the way up, and just flange, flange, flange. And I just work it down the edge. And I'm going to do that around this whole edge, the back edge, and this front edge. Under here, like I had said earlier, these are just pinch weld. You know, this fender overlaps. This will be pinch weld. Over here, I might flange it a little, maybe not as deep. And I might even get to a point where some of it will be butt welded. I really don't know what that's going to look like until after I get my initial stuff done into it. It just takes time. I'm gonna so after I make the flange, I'm gonna bolt the skin back on over the top of everything and then rescribe it. And then after I rescribe it, I'm gonna cut the metal out, but I'm gonna leave myself an extra 1/2 inch of material wherever I've got a flange. After that, put it back on, test fit it again. There's probably going to be times where I'll need to trim this just slightly. It's probably going to be a little high in areas, which is fine, but I'll know that because the metal will not be sitting below my flange. It'll be above it. I need to be able to see the top of this flange just a little bit. I've got a 1/2 inch of room to play with there, right? A lot of that can be filled in with welding. You know, if you're careful, you don't want to warp it. There's some tricks in welding it. So I just thought I'd show a little bit about that. So I'm going to go ahead and get this all flanged. I'll get this prepped, cut again, marked again, cut again, and I'll start getting clamped into place, and I'll show you what the Clecos do for me and how I like to use them. And we'll go on to the next step. Okay, so I've got this thing somewhat fit, and I'll show you what my goal was in this. You know, the part of the reason I like flange welds so much is because of Clecos. And what I'm going for there is when you're looking down the side of the car, you know, obviously there's a little bit more of a gap in the flange here. Again, I'll be filling that in, and you can see how small it is, you know, how big my finger is. It's pretty crazy, but looking down the side of that, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it in the camera or not, but, you know, I'm looking for that perfect radius where it goes around the car there, and I've still got my angles, you know. Back here is a nightmare. This is going to look really good when it's done if I can get the light right here, but my key point is this flange needs to be in line, and it's hard to see because I cleaned the metal off there, but I wanted the bumper flange to be in line with the original dent here, not dent, but part of the fender. Someone tried to pull dents and whatnot in this. I'm going to be beating this back with a body hammer and getting my line back. This is actually a butt weld right here, but right now I just wanted to focus on that upper edge. So the Clecos are great. I don't know if you've ever seen Clecos or not before. If you haven't, they're just a handy little tool. You know, I just buy them on Amazon, nothing special. I'll show you how they work, but you can see that flange there, you know, that I made. I relief cut this corner. This is a hole, sure, but that'll weld up, no problem. Just trying to get that fit in nicely, and for the most part, that's where I want it. You know, this is going to get welded up and it'll have Duraglass over it. There was a dent here, but I didn't want to take it back into the door jamb. It's not much of a dent at all. I'm going to beat that out with a body hammer. But I want to do all this metal work first. I'll show you how Cleco works real quick. These are really cool little, it's like a clamp, you know. So like I had said earlier, I had backing behind this. I pushed the fender back out where I liked it, and then I drilled my holes in the flange. And this is just a pair of Cleco pliers. You can see I drilled a little hole. So that goes back to the flange, and what this is, it's a clamp. So when you push it tight, it makes it smaller, you know, and get it through the hole. And then you can release it, and it spreads out and clamps it. So this is a real good way to hold the metal to keep it where it needs to go. I'll try and do this in the camera. And you're good to go. You know, it's not super tight, but I'm just trying to hold the metal into one place. Nice thing about these is when I do get my final fitment in here, I'll spot, you know, in between them. And I'll actually do a spot here, I'll do a spot over there, I'll do a spot there, kind of move the heat around. And then I'll pull these out after I've got a bunch of spots in it. You know, the inside is just clamped. There's a lot of flexibility in this pinch weld, you know, so I'll focus most of my welding up there. I am going to be punching holes in the inside of the flange here on the fender and along the bottom of the flange here. That way they'll be basically mimic a spot weld, you know. It'll be I'm going to punch holes, and then I can weld on the inside of that new fender lip that I did. So those are Clecos. That's a flange. That's going to be a flange weld. I'm really liking how this is turning out. You know, it's still in its early stages. After this, I'm going to make a couple more marks, clean up that edge, clean the bottom edge. Really what I like, what I'm seeing. Make sure I've got bare metal anyway, all the way where I want it, and then pull it off. Test fit it one last time, and then I'll get to welding it. So there's not a whole lot more to show right now on this. I'm going to go ahead and maybe do some time lapse of me tack welding this thing back up, and then a final shot of what the finished product looks like, and we'll go from there. Thanks. Okay, so you saw me do a little bit of the tacking. I'm probably going to wrap up the video of this, but I want to get some close-up views of what this looks like, kind of. So my goal in tacking is to, you know, just tack it all around, kind of spread the heat out, I'm trying to keep it from warping. And since I'm just using my Miller, it's a 175. I've got an 030 wire in there. I probably could actually lighten the wire up, make it a little easier on me, but the 030 is working, especially on the flange weld. But what I want to show you is this is the different stages, right? So I go through and spot all over, and then I come back and I remove a Cleco, and then I fill it. So like there was a Cleco here, there was a Cleco here. But my goal in all this is to keep that from warping. And if you look down the side of that, you can see that this panel and this panel are just, they're flowing for the most part. Now, this isn't done, it's not fully welded yet. You know, there's still going to be a slight low spot along this crack for the most part, but it'll be ever so slight. I mean, you know, there's going to be a light layer of Duraglass over that when I get done. I'll show you the other side. It's not fully ground, but part of it's ground and part of it's not yet. So this was the other side that I did, and kind of the same thing. You know, this has been ground. It's still got a slight gap in it, or a slight indent, just slightly. You know, I could heat shrink it, but I really like the idea of, you know, getting a little bit of Duraglass in that weld, seal it all up. You know, before I do that, obviously I'll use wax and grease remover, clean it off real well, dry it off real well, and then, you know, do my body work. But yeah, that's kind of what it looks like after it's fully welded and just ground. You know, you can see where my Clecos are on this one. I did a flange on the on this piece. On the other one, it went up in there, but you can see where my Clecos were at. So a little bit of grinding left to do there, and you know, that's where it's not ground yet, right? It's just kind of spot welded and tacked in there. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to go with a continuous weld here. What I do, you can kind of see it here, you know, I'll weld like little 1-inch sections. Like I'll do this one, then I'll go do this one, then I'll go do this one, then I'll do that one. And I'll kind of do that all the way down the panel, taking my time, you know, taking a break, looking at it, letting it cool, let it cool on its own. You can use water to cool these down as well, quicker, but I don't want to risk shrinking it up, you know, because then I'd have to tap it back down. In a perfect world, I can kind of let it heat a little. It's going to warp in slightly, and then it's going to come back on its own, let the air temperature bring the metal back on its own. At least that's what's working for me. You know, and you can see over here my spots. You know, I still have some spot welds to do. I want to do one there. You know, I want to get them to where they're about an inch, maybe less than, apart. That way I'm going to just weld in between those two spot welds. Go over here, maybe weld between those two spot welds. The other thing I do too is to make sure the metal's tight. I don't know if the light's going to be good enough to see this, but like, you know, before I spot welded this, I took the screwdriver and just put a slight bit of pressure, just a slight bit of pressure. I don't want to push the panel in. At the same token, I don't want it to come out on me. So the Clecos hold it pretty well too, but you know, just everywhere, you know, there's a flange right here. You can see this is the upper edge of the flange. See it in the camera. You can see that's the upper edge of my flange, and that's the metal. So this now is perfectly flush over the top. So again, I do want to make sure this metal's down. So I'll just, you know, as I'm welding sometimes, if the metal doesn't look super tight, I'll just slightly push it, just ever so slight pressure, just to make sure it's nice and tight. So that's kind of how that looks as I'm working around. Down here I did a butt weld, you know, I just clamped it till it was perfectly flush, and then, you know, adjusted it. And if I needed to just put a slight bit of adjustment on it, I just hold it with a screwdriver right on the edge and just give it a light little push if it wasn't perfectly lined up. So it's very time consuming, but I don't know, it's fun, and when it gets done it'll look pretty good. So hey, if you like the video, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. I'll do some more updates on this car. I'm going to shoot this thing with epoxy primer once the welding's all done and the Duraglass is on it, and just get it sealed. That way, you know, there'll be no more of that little surface rust that happens. You know, I don't know what kind of primer this is, but, you know, like that. Just clean this thing up pretty well. So yeah, hopefully that was a little bit informative or fun to watch, or kind of see what I'm up to in the shop. Thanks.